Hi, welcome to Nerd Culture. I'm Armand Gutierrez. Today we're going to be discussing good versus evil, big corporations versus small business, Canada versus rudeness. We love stories about conflict, and yet for whatever reason, nerds don't do well with conflict in the mythos. We're always the ones being bullied and overcoming it through some special way, or at least have a disadvantage in the beginning and learn to do normal things and win in the end. But in the real world, we have triumphs over conflict in the digital realm. If somebody's bullying you in a video game, you just press block or report them. But sometimes anonymous people have done tons of good and bad. One dude beat a dog and posted it on 4chan, and the guy was arrested because Anons found his Facebook, sent in evidence, and then he was arrested and charged. That's better than any Cumberbot Sherlock case. Moodykins even talked about it on TED Talks. Thanks to schools trying to stop bullying, there are tons of consequences for people's actions, which protects many people and nerds sometimes. By the way, don't let your kids send nude pics of themselves. That was a huge problem when I was growing up. Everyone was doing it. It was stupid. Nerds are becoming more and more protected in school, and people are learning more and more about being generally a good person. And yet, what is it that people aren't doing that nerds are? Well, that's practicing conflict. Sure, we all gossip, talk about another person who has a problem, but are you actually seeking out a defined issue to defeat? That's what makes nerds so oddly different about conflict. We practice and create elaborate situations where there are multiple problems and very finite solutions. Dungeons & Dragons is a conflict generator that allows one person's imagination of issues go wild and everybody else has to survive. Warhammer is an epic model building, dice rolling, and rulebook headache of a miniature game that lasts for so long most people have a food break in the middle of the war. I'm going to kill you after this hamburger. And of course, Magic the Gathering is a rule-definitive example of fast-paced, hardcore collection of conflict that to know if you have a fair chance against someone, you just have to say, oh, is that a Type 1 deck? Tabletop games, board games, and video games are all just massive plays of conflict. So with all this conflict resolution practice, why is it that nerds are still not seen as the master problem solvers amongst people? Well, it's probably because all these games strive for three things: specific rules, specific goals, and above all, fun. Of course, nerds can't be seen as problem solvers when the problems were made up specifically to be fun and to feel safe while doing those things. I don't care if you're a level 20 black robe wizard and you died because you went against the order to save your loved one. There are no real-world consequences other than who gets the last beer in D&D, in some households. If we take a little bit closer look at D&D, we can easily see the different types of conflict that arise amongst players that happen all the time in real world. If a player goes against the group and starts shit with an NPC, the group gets to decide if they want to bail that person out. But if they do bail that person out, and if another character dies because of one person's poor decision making, then that means after the game, there'll be some tension. Think about it like one of your coworkers told the bosses that the group project would be done early when everything was fine, and getting it done early is pushing it. Now you have to pull an all-nighter, and no one is happy that extra work was put on them for a little bit of praise for one person. I also don't care if you're a Kinder rogue. You shouldn't have provoked that goblin guard. Now I gotta stab a bitch and I died because of your mistake. Is an argument and conflict of what it would sound like. Dealing with the other players in the game, in and out of game, is very political and complicated. People want different things when they play D&D, and that isn't always pointed out. Sometimes toes are stepped on, and just because the game is over doesn't mean the conflict is. The Dungeon Master has to not only be the enemy for the player to fight, but they also must be the friends, allies, and world for the players to enjoy. If the player fights amongst themselves, then the Dungeon Master must resolve the issue. Nerds not only practice conflict through games, we find ourselves in volunteering conflict that let us deal with group dynamics more than most. We enter in competitions when you learn manners on how to not showboat, yet still talk about your control deck that actually kicks ass. But don't get me wrong, even though we strive for all this, a lot of nerds are still a pain in the butt to deal with, just like anybody else, really. You will always have one person who doesn't get the message or is just a little too strong. But we just do things a little differently. If you play role-playing games, that is. But when it comes to games, we do more than just sit around and pretend. We hone our skills to deal with people little by little until the conflict becomes just a dice roll. I'll see you next time.